You know, sometimes a bike comes along that just looks like an absolute dream, but under the hood, it's got a few gremlins just waiting to stir up some trouble. So in today's video, we're going to go over 10 of the most unreliable motorcycles. First up, we have the Harley-Davidson Street 500. Now, this was supposed to be Harley's grand entry-level option, but if you ask me, it's more like a rough draft that they forgot to revise. First off, let's talk about those brakes, and particularly the rear ones. The stopping power is, well, about as reliable as a teenager promising to take the trash out. Riders have been complaining left and right that the rear brakes just don't deliver what you'd expect from a Harley. And then there's the engine. Inconsistent power delivery is putting it nicely. It's like trying to get your lawnmower, like that old one that you've had in the garage for forever, to start on a cold morning. You're just not sure what you're going to get. Now, if you're new to motorcycling, this might make you second-guess your life choices. Oil leaks and clutch problems are just the cherry on top of the cake right here. Up next, we have the Royal Enfield Himalayan. Yeah, the 2018 version, to be exact. Now, I've got a bit of a soft spot for this bike. I mean, the slogan was something like, built for all roads, built for no roads. And I admit it, I was all in, but sometimes love makes us a bit blind, doesn't it? Well, fast forward a few years, and, well, it's got a reputation, and not the good kind. You see, this bike, as rugged as it looks, has some, let's just say, character-building issues. First up, oil leaks. Yeah, that's right, not the kind that you can just ignore for a while. We're talking oil dripping around the engine casing and gasket seals like it's got a vendetta against your garage floor. And if you're planning for a long adventure, you'd better bring a mop. Number 3, the Buell Blast. Now, this thing just wasn't unreliable. It was practically a masterclass in how not to design a beginner motorcycle. You know it's bad when Harley-Davidson themselves decided to publicly shred the bike just to make a point. That's like burning your own cookbooks because the recipes were that bad. So what made the Buell Blast such a nightmare? Well, first off, the torque on this thing was just too much for beginners. Instead of giving you a gentle introduction to riding, it jerked you around like it had something to prove. Combine that with a clutch friction zone that felt like trying to balance on a tightrope in a windstorm, and you've got a recipe for disaster. The brakes? Oh, they were aggressive all right. Too aggressive. They locked up at the worst possible moments, making you feel like the bike was actively trying to throw you off. It's no wonder that there were multiple lawsuits from riders crashing into walls during Harley's own rider training courses. And the bodywork was made from golf ball plastic, supposedly to protect it from crashes, but it just made the whole thing feel cheap and real disposable. It was crude, clunky, and overperformed in all the wrong places, while drastically underperforming in others. Number 4, the KTM 390 Duke. Now, I get it. The KTM 390 Duke looks slick, it's compact, it's stylish, and all around perfect for beginners, right? Well, man, let me tell you, the 2016 model year has more than a few skeletons in the closet. First off, overheating. Yeah, it's not just you sweating on those summer rides. The underpowered cooling system on this bad boy struggles in hot weather or when you're pushing it a bit longer. It's like asking the AC to cool down a bonfire. It's just not going to happen, and it'll have you sitting by the roadside more often than you'd like. And let's not forget the electric gremlins. We're talking fuel gauge issues, lights that decide that they've had enough for the day, and a starter motor that plays the game of will I or won't I far too often. It's like trying to use Wi-Fi in the middle of nowhere. It's unreliable and bound to frustrate you. Oh, and the plastic components around the fuel tank? Yeah, they're not just for show. They're prone to cracking and leaking, which is a kind of surprise that nobody wants. Number 5, the 2009 Aprilia RSV4. Now, when the 2009 Aprilia RSV4 hit the scene, it had the kind of roar that made people stop dead in their tracks. That V4 engine wasn't just impressive, it was legendary. But here's the kicker. The performance that wowed the crowd came with some pretty dicey issues. One of the big ones? The connecting rods. I mean, they're kind of like the backbone of your engine, and let's just say that Aprilia's got a long history of them snapping like a toothpick under pressure. That's not something you want if you're hoping to keep that engine in one piece, right? And it's not just the rods that'll have you holding your breath. Let's talk about the fuel system for a minute. Fuel pumps and injectors, you'd think they play nice, but no, not with this one. Malfunctions here aren't rare, and when you're expecting to hit those high revs, the last thing you want is a finicky fuel pump. I don't know about you, but I like my bikes to keep going without any hiccups. Number 6, repackaged Chinese clones. Cleveland Cycle Works, or should I say Cleveland Copy Works, because what they're really doing is just slapping a fresh coat of paint on old, outdated Chinese clones and calling it a day. The engines are based on ancient Suzuki or Honda designs, but don't be fooled. They're not even close to the originals. These bikes are made with cheap, low-quality materials, and it really shows. Build quality, it's worse than any soapbox derby car built by a bunch of Boy Scouts in 1955. You want a retro look, but what you get is just a retro headache. And it's not just Cleveland Cycle Works. In Europe, brands like MASH and Mutt Cycles are pulling the same trick, rebranding old designs and building them out of subpar material. Now, these bikes come with all the charm of something that's going to leave you stranded by the side of the road, and let me tell you, the charm wears off real fast when you're trying to figure out why your brake caliper just detached mid-ride. Yeah, you heard that right. People have reported brake calipers just giving up and letting go under normal use. It's not exactly the kind of excitement that you're looking for on a casual Sunday cruise, right? Well, these bikes are notorious for having all kinds of issues, from electrical problems to poor welds to engines that seem to be allergic to running smoothly. Riders end up sinking more money into fixing problems that they would if they had just bought a quality bike to begin with. Number 7, the 2013 Triumph Street Triple. Now, don't get me wrong, this bike has got some moves. It's lightweight, it handles like a dream, and that power delivery, it's as smooth as butter on a hot biscuit. But if you're thinking of clocking up high mileage on this thing, you might want to hold your horses. Now let's start with the cam chain tensioner. For those of y'all who aren't familiar, this little piece is supposed to keep the timing chain tight, basically like a seatbelt for your engine components. But the 2013 Street Triple cam chain tensioner, that's got a bad habit of failing early, and that means you're left with an unsettling rattling noise that won't quit. And if you let it slide, you're looking at serious engine damage down the line. And it's not just annoying, it's a ticking time bomb that'll have you regretting not fixing it a lot sooner. And the maintenance nightmare. The Street Triple isn't exactly what you call low maintenance. Owners often find themselves dealing with issues well before the 7,000-mile mark. Between the cam chain tensioner and the electrical gremlins, you're looking at a bike that demands a lot more attention than most of us are willing to give. Number 8, the Yamaha YZF R1. I love the R1 as much as the next guy, but the 2015 model, it's got more surprises up its sleeve than a magician at your kid's birthday party. Not the fun kind either. You see, Yamaha tried to make the 2015 R1 the kind of bike that would make your neighbors peek through the curtains whenever you fired it up. They nailed the look, they nailed the power, but did they nail the reliability? Not quite. The gearbox on this thing, now that's where the fun takes a real nosedive. And let's not even get started on the ECU. Some folks have had the engine cutting out mid-ride, like it's deciding it just needs a little break. Now, I don't know about you, but the middle of the ride is the last place that I need my engine taking a nap. Plus, the wiring harness? Yeah, not Yamaha's finest hour. Durability issues mean that even if everything else is working, the electrical gremlins might still show up and ruin your day. Number 9, the 2012 Suzuki GSX R1000. Now, this beauty can take off like a rocket, but there are still some major issues that make it less reliable than you'd hope, and I'll break it down for you. First up, the transmission. The bike's transmission is notorious for premature wear, and that affects the smoothness and consistency of your shifting. A lot of folks have found themselves wrestling with gears that just don't want to cooperate. And let me tell you, when I'm riding, I want my bike to be as smooth as butter, not giving me the old will I or won't I every time it shifts. Now, then there's the overheating. This GSX R1000 has real trouble keeping its cool in warm weather or heavy traffic. The cooling system just doesn't seem up to the task, and before you know it, you're worrying more about the temperature gauge than the road ahead. It's not exactly what you call dependable, especially on those long and sunny rides. And this bike drinks oil like my Aunt Linda hits the sweet tea on a hot day. It's got an unusual thirst, and if you're not constantly on top of it, you could end up with engine damage from running low. It's a real problem, and one that could lead to extra wear and costly repairs. Nobody wants to deal with surprise engine trouble just because their bike decided to go through oil faster than expected. Number 10, twin cam Dynas. Now, the idea behind the Dyna was to merge the maneuverability of the Sportster with the heft of their touring models. It sounds like a solid plan, right? Well, in theory maybe, but in practice, these bikes had a lot more character than most riders bargained for. And by character, I meant issues that could leave you stranded on the side of the road, wondering why you didn't just buy a Honda. Well, first up, the cam chain tensioner in the early models were a complete nightmare. These things were essentially ticking time bombs that could fail without warning, leaving you with an engine better suited for a doorstop than the open road. It's no wonder that if you're looking at a used Dyna from the late 90s or early 2000s, the first thing that sellers will brag about is replacing the cam chain tensioner. It's almost like an admission that Harley didn't quite get it right that first time around. And let's talk about the 6-speed transmissions. Harley wanted to give the Dyna a bit more versatility, but the early 6-speeds were notorious for their failures. Imagine hitting the open road, excited for a smooth cruise, only to find that your transmission has other plans. It's like having a buddy who's always down for that road trip, but then flakes out halfway through. It's frustrating and unreliable. And then there's the infamous Dyna Death Wobble. Now, this wasn't just a slight vibration, it was the kind of wobble that made you question if you'd make it to your destination in one piece. The wobble was often due to poor frame geometry combined with weak suspension, making the whole riding experience more of a gamble than a joy. It's almost a rite of passage for Harley owners, but the early twin-cam Dynas took it to another level. So what do you think? Is the twin-cam Dyna worth all the hassle for the sake of the Harley experience? Did we leave any engines out? Well, let us know in the comments below.